Welcome to Invest Well, Be Well, a podcast for wiser investing and stronger living. I'm Rusty Vanneman, longtime investment professional, and I'm joined each week by my co-host, Robin Murray.
Thanks, Rusty. I'm a storyteller and journalist, and I am so excited to explore the ideas, insights, and people shaping the intersection of performance and purpose.
This podcast is for thoughtful investors and driven professionals who want to grow in their portfolios and in their personal lives.
We'll talk long-term investing, behavioral finance, personal development, and what it takes to live and work with intention.
So let's get started. Let's invest well and be well together.
This podcast is brought to you by Main Management, LLC. Since 2002, Main has been recognized as an ETF strategist that combines an institutional process with the personalized service of a boutique firm.
Invest Well, Be Well is also sponsored by State Street Investment Management. Founded as a pioneer in ETFs, State Street Investment Management, through its SPDR brand, brought the first U.S. ETF to market with a SPDR S&P 500 ETF trust, commonly known by its ticker symbol, SPY.
Our guest today is Robbie Cannon. He's the founder of Horizon Investments, and that was great, Rusty. So many cool conversations in there.
Yeah. Again, Robbie, he is a founder and investor, and he is, as you will soon hear, one of the most energetic and enthusiastic people I've met in our profession. I've known him for about 15 years, and over that time, I've always been inspired by his passion for helping asset managers, financial advisors, and most importantly, investors. And again, he's done a lot of big things. He helped found and build Horizon Investments. It's one of the leading firms in goal-based investing. He's involved in fintech now, which is helping firms better connect and communicate with their clients. As we also discuss, he's deeply involved in the broader investment community through the Money Management Institute, otherwise known as MMI. And this includes the Thrive program, which is something that helps emerging and boutique asset managers grow their businesses and better serve investors. And again, as you're going to hear, he brings both entrepreneurial energy and thoughtful perspective to everything he does. And today, we talk about how fintech is transforming investor experiences, why emerging managers matter to investors and financial advisors, and how he personally sustains such a high level of drive and performance. What were your takeaways?
Yeah, I thought our conversation about emerging managers and firms was really interesting. He obviously has so much insight into building a firm and what goes into that. And, you know, we also talked about building a team and having those diversity of viewpoints on that team. He's very self-reflective. He's really insightful about what he brings to the team and what he's looking for in other people and how to kind of balance that out and build a strong, diverse team together, which it was just really interesting to hear him talk about that. Yeah, so just great conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I love this guy, and his answers were really great. So, and maybe I'm biased because so many things he said, it's like I was just nodding my head agreeing with. I didn't know where he was going to take some of the answers, but when he said it was like, absolutely, I love that answer. So anyway, let's give it a listen.
Well, Robbie, welcome to Invest Well, Be Well. It's so good to have you on the show today.
Great to be here.
Robbie, it's exciting. It's great to see you. It's great to hear you. And to get this ball rolling, a tradition on our podcast is to begin by asking, we need a walk-up song to set the tone for the interview. What is your walk-up song?
Yeah, I mean, I love this question because I'm a product of the 80s. So everybody that knows me is probably going to say, he's going to talk about Def Leppard. He's going to talk about Van Halen. And I want to say Jump so bad, but I just saw Shinedown at MSG, and it's got to be Sound of Madness, and it's got to be Shinedown. And I'm saying it's this year. Would it always be that? Probably, because I'm a product of the 80s. I'm a hair band guy, even though I'm bald.
I love it. I love it. Hey, we play hair bands in this household. Whenever my wife is in a slightly down mood, I always put on the hair bands to get her fired up.
You got to crank them up.
Kickstart Your Heart by Motley Crue. That always works in our household.
Oh my gosh, that's a super, I mean, that's, classic. It's got to be on everybody's rotation.
And since we do have a playlist on Spotify, since we announced Jump by Van Halen and Kickstart Your Heart by Motley Crue, they're also on the list now. So we just added 3 songs to the playlist.
That's awesome.
Yes.
All right, Robbie, let's talk about fintech. And fintech tools promise better engagement and personalization, but they also reduce human interaction. So in your view, what do you think the right balance is between tech efficiency and human empathy in wealth management?
Yeah, I mean, I really think, and you guys, we've been around for years in this industry, and the balance has always been, should we disintermediate the advisor? Should we not disintermediate the advisor? What's the balance? And then you have this whole Robo 1.0, I would say, sweep into the industry. And I would say it's interesting because it was couched as robo advice, and it really wasn't advice. It was more of a, portfolio engine. And now with AI, you have this 2.0, which is the robo advice really is starting to be actually advertised as advice, and it really is starting to give advice. That said, unfortunately, you see the divide between those that use advisors and those that are self-direct or don't use advisors. So I'm going to say I'm not in the disintermediation camp. It's kind of like, so maybe probably advisor enhanced or, advisors with AI are probably going to be better than their advisor counterparts from 20 years ago, let's say that. But also, I'm just a firm believer that individuals, especially as they go up in wealth, need advice. There's just so many different categories and overlapping convergences of categories that, the individual without an advisor, I think, is at a disadvantage to what the market in terms of the product sets, the solution sets that they're being offered. I just think they're at a real disadvantage to pick the optimal solution. So I think the advisor is a really nice guide or navigator in that type of environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that going away. To your point on engagement, I mean, Robo 1.0 was kind of nice because it brought in kind of gamification into the advice or the financial service marketplace. And that was probably really necessary.
Yeah.
Right. You and I first came in, the interaction was pretty much on the phone. Right. So you had a phone call with a client and they were asking about some stock or bond or CD or something like that. And now, the interfaces are pretty slick and visually inviting. And also from an explanatory standpoint, it's a lot easier to explain the math behind some of these products with visuals. So I like the engagement as fintech evolves, but we do have to talk about AI and kind of where AI sits in relation to the whole idea of disintermediating the advisor.
I think it's a great point about gamification because there is a fine line in there. Because on one hand, it does make it more enticing and engaging and could actually be an effective education tool. But there probably is a line where maybe it could create too much activity and, too much noise. But I think that's a great point about gamification.
Well, I think mobile's one. I think we can say that, right? Hey, mobile over desktop is one. And the problem with mobile is that everything's set up for you to make an emotional or a quick decision. And you have this fast, slow kind of concept. And we want clients to make really good, well-informed decisions. And the device that's mobile, and the way we put technology in mobile is actually not suited to make that well-informed decision. It's actually helping you make a very fast decision.
Yeah.
So on this same topic, how do you think data is changing the way asset managers and advisors serve investors? And what do you think are the biggest opportunities ahead?
Yeah, I mean, from a data perspective, which I think super interesting to me is, we talked about, early on in our careers, the interface was the phone and it was, hey, let's talk about this stock or bond. The advisor right now, so if we're talking to financial advisors, I would say your world is much more complex with technology than it ever was before. And the reason why is, to your point, data. There's so much more data, so that risk is so much more well-defined and meticulously placed across your financial profile that now as an advisor, I have to be aware of everything. Whereas maybe I just had to be aware of a stock or a bond and how it was moving. Now I got to know whether you're on track or off track and all the risks associated with all the things that I put in your portfolio. So it actually puts a burden on, I think, both the advisor and the customer. But I think that's where the software is coming in not only from a future perspective and an evolutionary perspective, but also from just historical perspective, it's doing the heavy lifting. Because quite honestly, if you put an insurance product with an investment product inside of a financial plan, the math alone associated with all of those interactions is incredible. And so without some sort of fintech or tool or calculator, what have you, you'd never even be able to do that with any degree of certainty on what the outcome was going to be. And so actually the stuff right now is really exciting from a future standpoint. I think that's what you're going to see is more the bundling, because you can model the bundling more. So again, when we started, it was a stock or a bond, and we kind of understood it the way, Peter Lynch talked about knowing what you own. So, hey, if you bought Nike, it's probably because you owned a few pairs. Now with global markets, and with alternatives and with financial plans, and it's a very complex game right now. And so you almost have to have fintech to even enter it. So from a data perspective, I love kind of where things are headed, because I think that capital was much more inefficient back in the day of a stock or a bond, and much more efficient in regards to household wealth now, as you can track, tax optimization, individual products, where they sit in the financial plan and how they're evolving through time. So I think it's a really exciting time, Robin. To your question about what's happening in the future, I would say, more of the connectivity and more of the bundling, really to drive better outcomes for the customer. That's the goal, right? So that obviously I'm speaking to the ideal.
Yep.
Sure. I also want to ask you about the Money Management Institute, where you're an active participant. Tell us more about it and what excites you about how MMI is helping the industry evolve.
So Money Management Institute out of New York, I would just say is the single point of leverage for small firms in the industry. And that's coming from an entrepreneur that built a small firm. And so, a couple years ago, they really started focusing on the lower end of the market from an asset management perspective. And that's 25 billion and below. And they really created an initiative called Thrive to create the premier destination for emerging managers. That's a code word for 25 billion and below. But the reason why it's such a point of leverage is that it's a collegial group. And so when I was on the board for 7 years, interacted with all the member firms, and you find another collegial group in regards to the financial service industry where everybody's trying to really kind of do the same thing, meaning drive customer outcomes and really like what's the right answer. And everybody's trying to figure out similar paths to that right answer. But in terms of like engagement and interaction, I could not find another organization like MMI. And so what they're doing in the industry, at least for the smaller managers, and I get to be part of that, is really like, hey, you're fragmented nationally. You're probably fragmented in terms of what channels you're offering product in, what types of product. Let's get together as a group of managers and really talk about what's going on in the industry and how we can be part of it. And so it's a really nice kind of destination for a smaller manager that really might not have the whole bit or scope of the industry, like a BlackRock or a Vanguard, that can kind of see everything that's happening in its different pockets across the country.
Yeah. So in my current role as the chairman of the advisory board for Main Management, we are a member of Thrive, and it's a great organization. But just to get more people involved in Thrive, could you share a success story or example from Thrive that demonstrates the program's impact on innovation or inclusion for these emerging managers?
Yeah, and I really talk about emerging managers like bumblebees. And I love the idea of having bees in the ecosystem, because there really is like very large firms at the top of financial services and asset management. And then there's all of these smaller firms, thousands of smaller firms. So you probably know BlackRock and Vanguard, but you probably don't know the thousands of names that are under the $25 billion mark. And they play such a special role in the ecosystem. And what I would say is they carry platform messaging to advisors and to end investors. They also pollinate all the flowers. So some of the larger firms don't go after some of maybe a rural advisor or a rural customer base, whereas the smaller manager might cater to them. And the speed of innovation in which they work is just a lot. It can be a lot quicker than the larger managers. So some of those attributes of those smaller managers make them super special to have in the ecosystem. But I would say this is that, there's a manager out of Philadelphia, Clark Capital, that, when I first met them, and obviously you know them well, I think they were $1.7 billion, $1.6 billion. And now I think they're plus 45 billion. And so I always say we don't want participants of Thrive, we want graduates. So that's what we're looking for. There's a really special firm in there right now, FM Investments out of DC, growing like a weed. And so there's some really, to your point, there's some really special firms. You mentioned Maine, Tim Arthur and all the members of Maine are obviously super special, but that's in California, right? So you do have some on West Coast, East Coast, that have these niches. And we want to bring those firms together and really kind of collaborate on what these different niches are and what they tell us about the marketplace in general.
I love that phrase. We don't want members, we want graduates.
Absolutely.
Well, you want members, but you also want graduates.
Well, look, I'm entrepreneurial. I have a bias. So I want all of these. It really is when you get into Thrive, you feel this energy from the entrepreneurs. And what's so cool about it, I think, is that it's a product or a group of people, meaning an investment team, up against the world. And you want to root for these firms. It's just fun to root for them. So I love being part of it.
So can you make the case for them, for those emerging and boutique managers? Why should financial advisors and investors consider allocating to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, right now, unfortunately or fortunately, you have very large platforms in the InvestNets and the Orions of the world. You have very large software firms in eMoney and Money Guide Pro and Right Capital. You also have very large asset managers in terms of Vanguard and BlackRock and American Funds and SSGA. And that's great and it's awesome, but it all looks the same. And so you start to go, hey, with similar products on similar platforms with similar technology, is the industry starting to get homogenized? And I think that's where the niche of these smaller firms can really add some color to maybe a black and white world, or at least a world that's evolving into black and white. It also helps you kind of pinpoint specific products that, really a larger asset manager might not carry or even really never talk about and don't even know they exist on the platform because it's not part of their approved or selected list that their wholesaling group is going out with. So I love partnering with small firms because they're probably going to do more for your business in terms of they're going to be personally invested in the advisor's business that they're working with. Number two, they probably have a niche strategy that belongs or fits in your overall asset allocation. And quite honestly, that creates the color versus the black and white. I think you can talk specifically to Kim Arthur, let's say at Maine, but you're never going to talk to Larry Fink at BlackRock.
So Robbie, on the flip side, in your own words, what challenges do these emerging managers face, particularly against these larger firms within the broader ecosystem? We're talking platforms, whatever. How can Thrive better support these firms and the challenges they faced?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like challenges, you and I have seen it our whole careers, I think, is, one is just capital, one is reach, and probably, quite honestly, one is trends. And so let's just kind of break those down and kind of like talk about them specifically, because like if you're a small manager and you look at the marketplace, you have to allocate your capital and you have limited capital. So I probably can't hire, 100 of the wholesalers to go after a national footprint. And then the question, if I can't do that, what should I do? Should I hire enterprise or national sales over a wholesaler? And so I have to start making decisions that may or may not be good for the business because my workforce might only be 2 or 3 people. So it gets very hard from a capital allocation standpoint. 2 is reach. I mean, and what I mean by that is just, you have to be able to play and probably put your flag in the ground somewhere. you can't really play all of the different platforms. They're not going to be available to you. So what is your reach going to be, and how deep are you going to go into the spot where you might have access? So if you're going to play at Orion, do you play at InvestNet? Well, I don't have enough bandwidth from a capital allocation standpoint. You have to make all these trade-offs that a small manager is making is a challenge to them growing. And then I just think current trends. So let's say I sign on with an advisor, and the advisor's like, Rusty, you have the best strategy. Robin, you have the best strategy in the marketplace. I'm going to devote $100 million of my book of $1 billion to you. And then he gets acquired. And so he gets acquired from a firm that doesn't have a selling agreement with you. That's a problem. And so you've just concentrated a lot of your effort, a lot of your capital allocation, and now you can't even do business with the individual because of the trends in terms of M&A activity in the advisor space. So I would say those are three issues that are pretty large that every small firm has to deal with in some way, shape, or fashion. And again, it's them up against the world, so it makes them innovative because they've got to adjust. They've got to do things differently. They got to do things more nimbly than their larger counterparts. They don't have, a hammer. They might have a very specific chisel. And so they've got to really work through navigating the industry.
All right, let's move from challenges to success factors. And drawing from your time building Horizon Investments, what are some of the pivotal lessons in growing an asset manager into a recognized brand?
Yeah, I mean, I've had the distinct pleasure, as you have, and Robin has been in the industry for a lot of years now. And so what's great is I got to spend 20 plus years at a firm that I was able to build and found and run for a long time. And what I noticed is, there's a twofold theme that develops. One is that you just got to weather the storm. And some of that is we've all been through 2000, 2002. We've all been through 08 and markets like that, where you can have the best plan, but the market doesn't care. Doesn't care what your plan is. It says you're going to wait another 7 years or another 8 years because this or that happened in the marketplace. And I think that's still kind of something that's really important, is how are you weathering the storm? Second is how do you weather trends? And so Horizon was really capable of weathering trends. And we all grew up together in the ETF model trend. Then there was the zero cost model trend. Then there was this whole idea of product to planning. So the industry shifted from selling stocks and bonds to selling, I would say more planning. And I think what we did well, and what Horizon still does well today, is really kind of try to understand what the end customer is trying to accomplish. And one of the trends we picked up on is the end customer is really trying to answer one of three questions. How do you grow wealth? How do you protect it? And how do you not run out of it? And we built our product set around what the end customer was actually trying to achieve with that money, and then kind of help advisors navigate that with outcome-based solutions. So Horizon, I would say from a theme standpoint, really was able to weather the storms, but also able to adjust to the trends of the marketplace. And I think from a success standpoint, probably everybody that has some degree of success probably needs to be able to do those two things really well. But to sum up the uniqueness is, half the battle is trying to figure out what that product market fit is and find the niche in the marketplace that you're able to exploit. And I think ours specifically was around this shift from product to planning in regards to advisors don't really sell investment product anymore. They sell financial plans. And so we kind of, I think, built around that kind of concept with trying to answer the customers, okay, in a planning context, what are the questions that they're asking? And so that's what we were able to solve and be successful with. And they still are very successful today.
Mm-hmm.
So building on that, what advice would you give to business founders today who want to grow their firms sustainably as the landscape becomes increasingly competitive?
I mean, I think that's the great question here is there an answer to that question? like, is there a formula to be successful? And, the one thing I can tell, and I always say, is there's no shortcuts. If there was one, we would all found it, and none of us can find it. So there isn't one. And a small firm that's looking to go up against the world with this idea of maybe a team or a product or some sort of differentiated message, for me, is super exciting. What's the answer? I mean, you're going to have to navigate markets like 2000, 2002, and 08, but also right now, and I think this is a great discussion, is that you're going to have to navigate what AI means. And I don't know anybody that really knows what it means, other than it seems like there's two crowds developing. There's this crowd that, here's an Elon Musk or a Sam Altman talk about the power of AI or maybe the future of AI, and just is like, yeah, you know what? They're talking into the future. They're talking about spaceships, right? We still don't have flying cars. And then you have the crowd that actually says, wait a second, this is something that's happening. I've got to take notice, and how do I incorporate it into my business model? And this, quite honestly, is probably where financial services is terrible. I mean, if I had one critique of financial services, it's around Bitcoin and AI, where, Bitcoin comes out, and Robin, you and I can get it in a kiosk at the mall. But if you're an advisor, you can't talk about it with a customer. Right now, if I'm a customer, I have access to AI, all these models, but if I'm an advisor, I can't use it in front of me. It's so weird. So then the question becomes, if I'm a small manager and I have to incorporate AI somehow, how do I do it in a regulated environment where I can actually help customers with it? And the answer right now is you can't. The regulators, don't really understand it, I would say, and haven't allowed the incorporation of it. And Bitcoin, you saw that as well. So Bitcoin was finally adopted into the industry, but it took forever. And so you're like, why are we at a disadvantage when customers are asking us questions and we can't use tools to either help them or, challenge them in different ways? But I do think that new firm is going to have to answer that question of how they're going to use or adopt, or how AI is going to be enveloped into their business model.
This episode of Invest Well, Be Well is brought to you by Main Management LLC, a pioneer in actively managed ETFs since 2002. Main Management starts with a clear fiduciary focus, delivering the transparency and personal attention you'd expect from a boutique firm. They provide financial advisors with solutions, not products. Main also believes investors should keep more of what they earn, emphasizing net of fee after-tax performance to help clients retain more of their returns. I've known Main Management for years. I've met thousands of managers over the course of my career, and one quality I really value: they invest alongside their clients. They eat their own cooking. Over 10% of the assets they manage are their own partner assets, and more than half of the firm are partners themselves. That says a lot. To learn more about Main strategies, including buy right hedged equity, U.S. sector rotation, thematic innovation, and all asset models, please visit their website at mainmgt.com.
Right. Well, I want to switch gears now to the second theme of our show, which is stronger living. And those who know you say that you are always moving 100 miles per hour. So how do you maintain that pace, both physically and mentally?
That is funny, but maybe that goes to my song choice, right? Is that if you listen to that Shinedown song, it actually is fairly fast. I'm one of those odd guys that speeds up to slow down, so to speak. I think it's, from my perspective, it's this idea of stewardship. So we only have so much time, right? I always joke that none of us are going to get off this island alive. And so what are you going to do with the time that you have? And, the individuals that know me as well, and the way you describe me is correct. My wife would say the exact same thing. I'm not beach, chair guy with a cocktail. I love cocktails. I love the beach. I love the chair. But in tandem, I feel like I'm wasting time. And so I I can't waste time. And I don't know if that came out of 2000, 2002 or '08. I would say those were really challenging times to be an entrepreneur with a staff, to bring the staff through. One of the lessons I learned in '01 was I burned out my original partner, and he wasn't frustrated. It was just that the stress of those markets, he just was like, you know what? I can't do this job anymore. And he went to coach baseball. And I love my partner from back in the late 90s. But what I would say is that taught me a lot about, all right, I don't want to burn anybody else out. And not that I did it, right? The market did it. But I want to keep that mood light, but the pace fast. And I think that's how you said I've moved at 100 miles an hour, but hopefully the other characteristics that you would put in place were, hey, he tries to have fun. And that is based on my partner's John, burning out. Is I do run at a fast pace. This market demands it, I think. And I feel like I'm accountable for every second. But I also, if I burn out, that's fine. I don't want to burn you out. And so I don't want that 100 miles an hour to affect you, even though I'm doing it. I think from a health standpoint, I was big into marathons until my doctor was like, you know what? Let's not run any more marathons. But I love running. I love watching people run. But I've gotten more involved in fly fishing. And so there's nothing like, I think, going to it. And I would promote this to all your listeners is go to a stream. Your phone is not in a national park where your phone doesn't work, right? And there's something about just standing in the water. It's cold outside and you're washing the fish. And it really even doesn't matter that I catch a fish anymore. It just matters about being out there. So.
Love it. Awesome answer. One point about the beach, though, I totally agree about the beach and sitting in a chair. However, in recent years, I have learned that I can now really enjoy about 2 hours sitting on the beach. I can't do all day yet. I can't do all day yet, but I can get 2 hours in and love it.
I don't know how you, 2 hours to me is like, I'm a book guy too, so I read a ton.
Yeah.
So I can see how you would read on the beach. Totally get that. Staring at the water, walking the beach, I just don't get it.
Yeah.
But I will say
to me.
Yeah, that's right. To each his own, right? Each his own.
So we talked about moving 100 miles an hour, but something else, for you have made a difference in so many people's lives, and you're still doing that. You're engaging, yet you're still engaged. But kind of drilling down a little bit more, what is part of your personal performance playbook? And we're trying to drill down into routines, disciplines, and practices that keep your energy high and your mindset sharp. You talked about you used to run, now you do a little fly fishing. Any other things that you do?
Yeah, I definitely, so I'm a list guy. And specifically, it's funny. So you have two different types of list people. So I'm going to tell you the different types. So one is you make a list, and this is my wife to a T, and this is why I love her, because she's opposite to me in this. She makes a list. There's 10 items she wants to achieve that day, and she checks every single one off. I'll just say this: listen to Shinedown. That would drive me absolutely crazy. Okay, so when I start a list, so I'll start it in the morning, and by the afternoon, it might have grown to 30 items, and it's impossible to finish them all. But what that means is I might finish 14 to her 10 because I'm continually lengthening my list. So my list will roll over the next day, and it might add another 50 things. Now, what happens though is when I move through it, and I don't move through it sequentially too. So people listening are going to be like, what are you doing? I'm a nonlinear thinker. So I don't think, A, B, C. I think A, squirrel, orange, C, right? But I'm making that list, and I am going to do all 500 things that are on that list. And it just continues to proliferate out and evolve. And I don't rip it out of my notebook and finish with that page of items. So I am carrying that through every day, every week until the book is empty, meaning I finished every single item throughout the entire book of lists. So that is one thing I do. I don't know if I recommend that though, Rusty. If it sounds like chaos, it probably is to you. It's very ordered to me.
I do the same kind of list, Robbie. Robin, what do you do for a list?
I have a list that it's similar in a way in that I have new items that roll over to the next day, but I always complete what's on for today. And I need that feeling of checking it off and making sure it's
you need. Yeah,
I'm more like Robbie. My list gets longer every day.
Well, I think it's the ambiguity, right? Is that, Robin, I would imagine you don't like a lot of ambiguity, and I thrive in ambiguity. Like, hey, I don't have to finish it. But here, maybe, Rusty, this is the difference is I have to always be thinking about multiple things at the same time. Like, I have to understand the connection points. And with a list, it doesn't, like, I need more than just that list to be able to kind of, hey, how do these things fit together?
Hey, it's a diversified portfolio.
Yeah, right. And it's to Robin's point. Maybe you're like, you guys are way overcomplicating life, and you're probably right. That's the problem with it.
Yeah, I get it. My husband is like that, so we're also opposites. It's that achiever thing and the Gallup strengths. I need to check those things off the list.
Yeah, we always did. We did profiling from a HR perspective, and it is amazing the contrast you have across an organization, because you really do have every type of person. I didn't think I probably wouldn't have believed it if I didn't see it. And so, if you think about a baseball team or a football team, every member of that team is so freaking important, and you don't realize it until you actually need that particular dynamic. And so, like that, maybe that's also a problem with the smaller firms, is you don't get to, at some point you'll see it, but with 3, 5, 10 people, you don't really see the dynamic that you really need to see with a larger group of people. Yeah, I love that diversity of skill sets concept, because you get so much horsepower from it.
I love that point about the personality test. I'm a huge fan of it. I think the reason why I'm a fan of it is just what you just touched upon, Robbie, is first of all, it is about self-awareness, identifying that, but more importantly, it's recognizing that other people are different. I mean, it just hits you over the head finally. It's not about me. It's about everybody else on the team. So I'm a huge fan of those tests for that very reason.
I made tons of errors trying to put a square peg in a round hole, and people going, why are you doing that? Or again, it goes back to burnout is, as a manager, you got to be really careful, positioning people on your bus, so to speak, because you can put them in the wrong seat because you just really don't understand the skill set. And that's not good either. So as a manager, you really need to be a steward of like the skill sets, and you need to really be able to understand where they fit in terms of where they're slotted from a business standpoint. Yeah, I think it's so important to think about your employees' happiness. And again, I'm not always, look, I drive pretty hard, as you said, and I do care about outcomes of the business, but it's hard not to think about making people happy, especially as you have a larger and larger staff.
So, Robbie, another question for you on the topic of stronger living, and I think it's an important topic that we ask a lot of our guests, is how has your approach to balance and recovery evolved over time as your career and your responsibilities have grown?
Yeah, I think from how do I recover, what I've realized through time, and it's actually, I traveled a lot in the 20-year plus period and continue to travel. And I think one of the recovery points that I realized was I actually need to travel. Like, I need that downtime in the plane where I've got music on and I've got my laptop open. It doesn't matter whether you're in first class or coach, right? Even though the person in front of you is going to knock into your laptop, but having it open and being able to think, having time designated to think, I think is super important for me in order to recharge. And we talked a little bit about reading. I would say reading fiction specifically. So I do read a lot of nonfiction, and obviously, I love the industry and kind of technology. But I would say reading fiction is a pretty big, important part of the recharge process. Is when you're kind of focused on a different set of ideas, what I tend to find is that my mind somehow wanders back to the industry and wanders back to the problems or wanders back to the list that I made and solves the different pieces of that list just by the relaxation of my mind focused in on the science fiction or whatever I'm reading and the music that I'm listening to. So I do need noise to do that. So I think a lot of people get into yoga, which again, I think I put yoga up against the beach chair concept. I don't know how people do that. And hot yoga is like, I don't know, that's an alien planet for me. I don't ever want to visit. Right. But that's I think a really important recharge moment is reading something different from the industry, listening to music, and allowing my mind to wander to what I'm working on.
I love that answer, but you know what? I've also changed my mind on hot yoga. I've done it now. I did it this summer, and it was awesome.
Robin, do you do hot yoga?
I do regular yoga twice a week, but hot yoga I have done a lot and I love it.
Yeah, it's great.
Again, you guys are aliens from that planet. I don't ever want to visit. My wife is an alien from planet Pilates, and that's also a planet that I'm not interested in visiting.
Yeah.
I am amazed at you guys. Somehow you're thriving with hot yoga. I don't know how that's possible.
So narrowing it all down, everything that we've talked about so far, what do you think is one practice or principle outside of work that you believe most enhances your decision-making as a leader?
I mean, I think the one thing that I probably focus on the most is this idea of stewardship and stewardship of the time that I have and the time that I've given. My dad passed when he was 65. That has a pretty big impact on me and my brother as we talk about kind of just life and life moments. I've watched aging parents that I think, as I was younger, I didn't fully appreciate how focused just the idea of time can make you. And then when you put, okay, wait a second, I don't really know the span, but I know that I need to be a steward of it. So I don't need to waste it. And some of that, I think for me, the big challenge is living in the moment versus living in the future. And we talk a lot, I ask this question all the time and maybe I ask you guys is, if you had to divide your thoughts into past, present, and future, how much is in the future, how much is in the past, and how much is in the present? And I would say that I live primarily in the future in my thoughts. And I really don't live in the past. So if you wound me or cross me or whatever, I'm probably going to forget it. And so from a stewardship of time, I have to constantly kind of go, all right, Robbie, you're calibrated for the future in terms of your thought process. You need to be more mentally here. That's what helps me that's what I'm thinking about all the time. So if you were to see me in New York or see me in Denver, down the street, and you said, Robbie, what are you thinking about? It's probably something to do with that kind of balance. But where do you guys fit are you thinking about the future, the past, the present?
I love questions coming to us. Robin, you get it first.
Well, that's kind of a tough one for me because, so speaking of strengths, another of my top 5 is context. So I am often thinking about where we've been to sort of make sense of where we are now and where we need to go. So I feel like I do spend a lot of time in that zone for work, but I'm not dwelling on it, I guess. I don't feel like that makes sense for me. But I use that a lot of figuring out where we need to go, thinking about where we've been. Yeah.
So you mentioned Gallup Strength Finders, and one of my 5 strengths is being futuristic. So I know, like you, Robbie, I'm always thinking ahead. Now, the only thing about that is I'm wired that way, and I'm always going to be wired that way. I do feel as if, when you read all like the wisdom literature, they always say you should spend a little more time in the present.
Yep.
Savor the day sort of thing.
Yep.
And, eat and drink and be merry sort of thing. And I can do that, but I feel like I probably spend way too much time in the future. But
is that the chair on the beach? I think it's the chair on the beach for me is like staying in the present. And it's super important to be in the present, right?
Yeah.
But that is, I think, more of a discipline, more probably like your yoga, where you really need, like, one, you need to be self-aware that you're in that future state as much as you are. And two, how do you bring yourself back? And I think that's probably the battle that goes on with me. And probably what I focus on the most is, all right, how can I be present given the time constraints that I have and wanting to make the most of the time that I have?
Yeah, right on. All right. So I love it when Robin says, ask for one thing. And I'm going to ask for one thing too, because I know a lot of our audience are young professionals. And so if you had to give one piece of advice to younger professionals about achieving success in both business and life, what would that be?
Yeah. I've got three boys, 26, 24, and 21. I hope that I really imparted this to them, that it's okay to fail. And I don't think you realize it in the moment, especially when you're young, is that how much failure shapes kind of your future path. And failure shapes a lot. I said future path, but it really shapes your character. It shapes kind of like the advice that you might seek. It shapes kind of what do you do with failure? Do you stuff it down? How is it affecting you as, from a personal standpoint, mentally? I don't know. It's hard in the social media world, a lot of stuff coming at the young professionals. There's a phrase from my father-in-law that he gave me when I was, I think, 25 that sticks with me. I'd be kind of curious. You guys carry around these phrases, your audience members carry around these phrases. And he said, when you make a decision, make it the right decision. And that's hung with me, like, for right or wrong, through, it's kind of like, a marriage vow or whatever it is. When I made a decision to go to Horizon, it wasn't going to be like, well, what if the market crashes in 2000, which it did? What if there's an economy downturn in 2002, which it was? What if in 2008, people are getting laid off left and right, and you don't know if you're going to, one, make a salary that year, or two, have to lay off people, and these are your friends. It was just, I need to persist through this. And I think that idea of embracing failure as a learning tool is a really important thing for a young professional. And I hope they're still teaching that, quite honestly, Rusty and Robin. I don't know if they are. And I don't know if I've done a great job with my kids of instilling that in them, that it's okay to fail. It's okay to buy a stock and it go down. But what did it teach you? Like constantly go back and have a debrief with yourself about, what did I learn from this? And I think that's how that young professional is going to get stronger. Constant positive validation. And I'm not sure that's good at building the foundation and the core piece of that personality for that individual as they move forward through life, because we all are going to have challenges. So I would probably, from a young professional standpoint, talk a lot about failure. But what do you guys think about?
I think that
how that's being embraced.
I think that's awesome advice. And I actually kind of feel, also having a lot of young men in my life, sons about those ages, that embracing failure is, a lot of them avoid it. They're avoiding failure. And I actually had a mentor when I was younger. I was probably a little older than 25 when I got this advice, but one of my professional mentors, just one of his big things was, just make a damn decision. You're going to be wrong a lot, but you're going to be right more often than you're wrong. Just make the decision. So just do it now, I guess, is another way of saying it. And I agree with that. What do you think, Robin?
Yeah, I think those are both great. If I think back on a phrase or something like that I sort of grew up with my mom, was she would say that you're always responsible for your own condition. So it's sort of, you can always change your life. Whatever is, if you're unhappy about something, do something different, make something different. Ultimately, it's up to you. You're not at effect of what's happening around you, your circumstances.
Well, I love that, because you hear a lot of young people talk about being stuck. I'm stuck. And like, what is that? Is that mental stuckness? Is it occupational stuck? But your mom is right to point out, you don't have to feel that way. You're not stuck. Like, we live in a great country with a lot of opportunity, and I love that. I hope that the young professionals, kind of hear what we're talking about, really embrace it. I just think, I don't know for you, Robin, guys don't like to talk about failure. They don't really go into a conversation. Hey, Rusty, man, let me tell you. But as you get older, you really do. You're like, oh man, I made some really boneheaded decisions. And I hope you don't have a question about them, because I don't really want to share all of them on the podcast. That could be an interesting podcast though, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that would be a long podcast. That's definitely long form.
Yeah. Cool. That's awesome.
Nice. Well, great. This has been such a great conversation, Robbie. We appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much. Before we let you go, where can advisors follow your work and continue learning from you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you can follow me at MMI. So get on their website, as well as, this is my New Year's resolution in November. I will tweet more. But I also have a book on Amazon that you can look for in terms of financial advice. So any of those kind of formats. But thank you for having me. Great time. Oh my gosh. Awesome discussion. And I nailed the walk-up song.
Oh, you absolutely.
I freaking nailed it.
We were able to work that 3 songs in on it. That was awesome. Robbie, we will have a link to the book on our show notes. And again, it's always an exciting time to be alive. And in our profession, our industry, it's such a bright future. You've had such a history of success. You're still making things happen. You've had so many words of wisdom for us today, and we look forward to many more conversations with you.
Rusty and Robin, you're awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll be back next week. Thanks for listening to Invest Well, Be Well. Let us know what you think. And if you like what you hear, don't forget to subscribe.
This podcast is hosted by Rusty Vanneman and Robin Murray and produced by Garrett Crosby.
If you have feedback, guest suggestions, or just want to connect, please visit my website, rustysbridge.com, or email me directly at rusty@rustysbridge.com. Until next time, invest well and be well. This episode of Invest Well, Be Well is brought to you by Bonrian Capital, led by my friend and colleague of nearly 10 years, Shana Sissel. Shana was named a top 20 wealth tech CEO in 2025, and it's no surprise. She's passionate, does the work, and knows asset managers, portfolio allocations, and alternatives like few others in the business. She's authentic, tough, and deeply cares about all her stakeholders, the kind of character you'd expect from the daughter of a police officer. If you want an investment manager who combines deep due diligence with innovative solutions and alternative investments, please check out Bonrian Capital at bonriancapital.com.